Welcome to today's ADIA webcast titled Navigating the Research Landscape, Key Strategies for Success. It's now my pleasure to introduce our host, Dr. Eugene Anderson, who is Chief Policy Officer and Managing Vice President of the American Dental Education Association. He leads the ADIA Policy Center. The ADIA Policy Center provides evidence-based research and analysis, collaborative advocacy, and thoughtful leadership. The ADIA Policy Center works for targeted portfolios including access, diversity, and inclusion, advocacy and governmental relations, educational research and analysis, and institutional capacity building. We are pleased that Dr. Anderson could join us as today's host. Dr. Anderson, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Kurt. We're fortunate to have three research experts with us today to share their expertise regarding how interested faculty can begin moving along a path towards conducting research. We have with us Dr. Eric T. Everett. He's the Associate Dean for Research and Professor for Pediatric Dentistry and Genetics at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill School of Dentistry. And Dr. Anna Karina Mascarenas. She's the Associate Dean for Research and Chief of Developmental Sciences at Nova Southeastern University College of Dental Medicine. And finally, Dr. Charles Sayre, Associate Dean for Research and the Director at the Center for Craniofacial Regeneration at the University of Pittsburgh School of Dental Medicine, and Associate Professor in the Department of Oral Biology, Periodontics, Bioengineering at the McGowan Institute for Regenerative Medicine. Thank you all for joining us today. In today's webinar, our listeners will hear directly from these experts about their perspectives regarding the criteria for launching or expanding an academic research career, how to identify research projects and funding opportunities, both at your institution and nationally, and finally, how to develop a personal strategy for navigating the research landscape. Once again, we encourage our listeners to feel free to post questions and comments in the chat box, and we will try to get to as many of those as possible. When we look at the literature on developing a successful research career, we see 6 main areas identified for faculty members. The first area focuses on passion. Passion is defined as any powerful or compelling emotion or feeling. This is not something one usually thinks about regarding research, but we'd like to hear from our experts just how important passion for research is. So we will see which expert we will begin with. Dr. Everett, you're up first. How do you feel passion is essential for a faculty member considering a research career?
Scientific research, I think, is a calling, especially for those of us who are naturally curious, and that curiosity then becomes our vocation. We all have our own stories that tell how we became part of academics. Sometimes it's because we're interested in teaching or mentoring, doing research, or simply just giving back to the institution where we trained. But those of us who spend many of our hours doing research, we do it partly because of the thrill of discovery, the satisfaction for adding new knowledge, and ultimately helping those who are afflicted or have an impact on important and significant health problems. The reality is that scientific research is hard, and true successes are often outnumbered by failures, and there is occasional disappointment. And there are times in our lives where we think about those days where the only responsibility we had was for learning and for doing research. In my case, I can look back to graduate school and my postdoc days. But now as an academic and a researcher, we are certainly saddled with a number of extra responsibilities. There were recent studies that suggest that nearly 30% of our time is consumed by administrative duties, managing labs, lab teams, writing grants, reports, a lot of compliance. There seems to be a new institutional compliance coming out just about every week that we have to respond to and keep up to date. All of this really is the business of doing science. And occasionally these research duties take us outside of the lab, which we often do not like, but it's important for our institution's mission, and that's where we serve on IRBs or IACUC and other committees. But it's very important to remember why we chose to be scientists and researchers. It's about passion and it's about commitment. Science is hard, the questions are difficult, the work is often challenging. But if you keep three words in mind, the first is significance. Why the research is important and who will benefit. It's the same word you use when you write a grant application. The next word is impact. This is a little bit harder to define, but essentially it's moving your field forward and keeping progress going. And finally, innovation. It's kind of redundant to say, but it's simply what's novel or innovative. We always like it when we're first to discover something. But what's, I think, quite important is to share your enthusiasm as a mentor with your colleagues and with others. It's really important to convey that enthusiasm, especially for the next generation. So much of our success is due to surrounding ourselves with excellence, becoming the expert, the go-to person. Do your best to create an environment that fosters discovery and success. And instead of seeking a balance, let the satisfaction of adding new knowledge, discovery, and of mentoring weigh more than the business end of research. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Everett. Drs. Mascarenhas and Fair, tell us briefly how you found your passion for research.
Maybe I can start. I mean, the passion for research was always there. As Dr. Everett mentioned, it's really driven by the inquiry, and you want to find novel things. But since I'm a clinician and my co-panelist also, you're also driven, the passion is also driven to develop novel therapies, to actually being part of changing the standard of care. And so being involved in these projects that would lead to a new clinical therapy or even a new clinical protocols will always be a passion, because that's actually what we do as a clinician scientist. So so the passion should be there, could also evolve. Yeah.
In my case, I think the passion might have been there, but who uncovered it for me was actually a mentor of mine, Brian Burt, who was my program director. I was doing a master's with him and had never been exposed to research, and that was my first exposure, was enjoying it. And he called me into his office one day. At the end of it, he says, "You're enjoying this. You might want to consider continuing with research and doing a doctorate program."
All right, thank you both. So for our second topic, our second key strategy for success in developing a research career, it's goal setting. So let's turn to our next expert to begin the discussion around the importance of goal setting. And we will begin with Dr. Mascarenhas. Could you share with our viewers your perspective on the importance of goal setting and why it is essential for research success?
Thank you, Dr. Anderson. It's never too early, in my opinion, to set goals for research. In fact, as soon as you consider an academic career, you need to have some ideas of the goals, as it will assist you in negotiating that first faculty research position or making a decision on which job you might take if you have multiple offers. Your research goals should be based on the type of faculty appointment you accept. If on a tenure track, then there are very specific expectations by the institution and the university on number of publications needed, or if you need to have funding, what kind of funding, is it NIH funding or other funding, with very specific timelines of when you're reviewed and by when you need to achieve tenure. You need to ask for this information as soon as you decide to apply for the position so you know what you're getting in for. If on a non-tenured track or a clinical track, there are still expectations for continuing contract and promotion with regard to scholarship. Setting goals should also be based on the available time you will have for research or what you negotiate for. Again, if on a tenured track, negotiate really hard for dedicated time for research and for startup resources. Sorry about that, some technical.
All right.
For a researcher, the goals are generally centered around 4 categories. The first milestone is achieving tenure or promotion, then attaining funding to support your research, becoming an independent researcher or an expert in your focused area, and of course, presenting and publishing your research. Goals around these are generally not mutually exclusive, but are interdependent. Achieving goals, in my opinion, to achieve the goals you've set for yourself, you have to be extremely proactive. Seek and find good mentors. Seek others within and outside of your institution, working in your area with common interests, and collaborate with them. Be very resourceful. Look for internal funding or seed money for pilot studies. In the early stages, every dollar counts. Volunteer to be a thesis advisor and engage these students in your projects and research. Develop a roadmap. Put it on your notice board and measure progress every 6 months. To be successful, you have to make a very conscious effort to make research a priority.
And how do you deal with setbacks?
For setbacks, you will have some setbacks and a lot of heartache. Unforeseen delays in building labs, recruiting staff, attaining funding, and sometimes project progression. Not sufficient time for research. If your appointment is primarily in a clinical department, then you can get reassigned to cover didactic teaching and clinics, particularly in the current economic climate, a lack of institutional support, or sometimes even a change of institutional leaders. Another great opportunity might come along and you decide to move. You lose substantial momentum on your research when you move. Your personal life, that also might set you back. Only you can set and control the professional goals for yourself. So make those goals very carefully.
Thank you, Dr. Mascarenas. Dr. Everett, can you share an example of a setback that you had to overcome?
I think my example is probably the same example that many faculty have experienced. That's of moving and relocating a laboratory, going to a new institution, learning new institutional rules, waiting for grants to be transferred. I consider all that a significant setback, but as a setback, it's not permanent. It's something that within months can be overcome. So that I think would be one of my typical setbacks.
Thank you. Our third topic, strategy to consider, is the importance of funding. So we're going to turn to our third expert to talk about funding, and that's Dr. Fair. What can you share with our listeners today in regard to how a new researcher can find funding for their research?
Yes, thank you, Eugene. So actually funding is quite a big question, and money is money, and I think we need to seek it from all sources, from federal, corporate, foundation, even your own institution if they have any programs for small grants or seed money or pilot studies. I think in the early stages, all of these small pots are very, very critical until you start applying for the larger grants. Also, at the federal levels, there are many institutions that they do offer specific fundings for new and junior investigators. And in the next slide, there is a list of federal agencies that they really target the new investigators because it is actually a very important topic for the country in the sense of having the new generation start their own research career. You have NIH with the NIH Pathway to Independence, the career program with the National Science Foundation, and the DoD and NASA and the Department of Energy. Also, the other point in funding is it's always good to have a diversified portfolio if you can achieve that. It doesn't hurt to have an NSF, an NIH grant, or DoD. Having diversification could actually be a very good thing. Also, early in your career, you should consider K grants, and these support mechanisms really are great for senior postdocs or faculty level at all, faculty at all levels, and they would protect your time towards dedicating at least 75% of your time to research. So K grants could be a big component in the early days. Also establish collaborations, and sometimes another PI or another collaborator is the PI on the grant, but you could be a co-PI, but still also draw a subcontract or a budget from that grant. And ideally, it will be great if you can go for a multi-PI. This way you get the credit as a PI for your tenure and promotion. So those are all strategy, but even as a co-PI, a budget is a budget, and whatever helps the lab moving forward is always good. And also keep in mind platform technologies. Basically, the same technology could be applicable to 2 different or 3 different therapies, and could actually be applicable to various institutes. And so this way, you have a grant submission process. By changing the aims, you could actually, with the same technology, achieve various clinical therapies. That's basically on the grant side.
Thank you, Dr. Sayre. Any additional funding tips our other speakers would like to offer?
I think it's important to realize where you are in your career. If you're just beginning and you've made this transition from maybe specialty training or your PhD, and this is your first full-time faculty job, there are a lot of expectations. And I think we all thrive on success. So starting small, even with an institutional grant or a foundation grant, the dollars are not large, but it's kind of fulfilling to get that award letter and to begin your work. And just remember, everything that we're doing is part of a long journey, and as you develop a research program, you're making incremental steps, and that includes building larger funding to do the more sophisticated work as you move along. So I really think it is dependent upon where you are in your career, and to just start small.
Thank you. Dr. Mascarenhas, what about for young early investigators?
So for young early investigators, particularly clinical faculty, I think ideally to partner with a more senior research faculty in their school is important, and with their help, maybe apply for seed money to do a small study, collect some pilot data, get exposed to research is an ideal way to start.
Thank you. Thank you all. On to our next topic, mentorship. As we all know, having a mentor in any field is a great asset. But how does mentorship enhance a new faculty's ability to navigate the research landscape? Turning to our next expert, we will have Dr. Sayre. What can you share with us in regards to the importance of having a mentor?
Well, mentors are actually play a really critical role, and as we heard from Dr. Mascarena earlier, it was her mentor who steered her into research, and really the mentors really play a role as advisors, coaches. They have an ear, to listen to you. They should be an experienced scientist, that they guide your research, give you feedback and critique, and it shouldn't be sugar-coated. It should be, the critique should be really raw, based on science. Also, they should help you define your research goal and then support you in the quest to achieve them. So it's really a share of knowledge between the investigator and the mentor, and provide encouragement and inspire you as you are progressing into your research career, and also help you in promoting your research. They should basically help you develop your research goals and construct a scientific network. And really, networking is key in science, and you want people to start knowing your research and what you're working on and getting excited about it. And so really the mentor is somebody you should trust and who always keeps your interest, your best interest in mind. So what should you expect from your mentor? Actually, they should help you define your training goals at the outset and evaluate them at regular intervals. They should meet with you regularly, and actually selecting a mentor, really you want to select somebody who has time to meet with you and discuss your progress towards these goals. They need to listen to you, your ideas, critique them, give you feedback, and give you really a constructive and timely feedback for your scientific work. Also support your growth through encouraging training opportunities, professional development, also building your networks, introducing you to scientific colleagues, and actually promoting your work. That will be something that a mentor could do, and acknowledge your contribution to the research through authorship and publications. So selecting a mentor is really critical as you're navigating the research path, and also you need somebody who can dedicate the time and actually listen and give you really clear and honest feedback. And yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Sayre. We actually want to turn to a question from one of our audience members before we say a little bit more about mentoring. And it goes back to the last topic on funding. One of our audience members wants to know, is there a funding source for research that has a direct impact on patient care?
Yes. Yeah.
And what would that source be? What agencies? If you could just help give some examples for our listeners, that would be great.
I mean, NIH, to my knowledge, they fund quite a bit of actually projects or actually grants that do have an impact on clinical cares and developing a new therapy. I'm trying to kind of tease out. If you're looking for a sort of a grant mechanism that takes two clinically approved product and to compare them, that's not really a research project, but to actually devise a new therapy. For example, just to give an example, if you take endodontic regeneration, the new technologies being used, those will definitely impact care, new materials for caries. So all of these are directly impacting how we deliver care. I hope I answered the question. I'm not sure if that did hit the mark.
I also think that we're so used to looking towards the NIH to be the major funder or the sponsor of health-related research. And translational research is certainly something that the NIH has embraced for quite a long time, and they even emphasize this during the process of peer review, that the project needs to have some potential for translation down the road. But most of us in dentistry, we still rely on a whole host of industry-sponsored research or contracts, and this is where most of the clinical trials are being conducted. So there are a number of really important hypothesis-generated studies that are very translational and are often supported by industry. And so these comparative effectiveness studies, they have tremendous merit, and I wouldn't turn away from those at all.
Yeah, I would agree with that, yeah.
Thank you. So back to mentoring. Dr. Mascarenas, how does one go about approaching a person you want to be your mentor?
I generally take the direct approach. I've generally read their work, and, you can pick up a mentor any time and point in your career and life. And so I kind of seek mentors all the time, depending on which different stage of life I am on my career. So I do the direct approach. I will know what their research is and what their interest is. If they can help me, I will have read and then make an appointment to see them, or if I see them at a meeting, we'll approach them at that point saying, I would like to talk more with them.
Thank you. Dr. Everett, would you like to add something on this topic?
Sure. I've always thought of mentors as being individuals as part of a long-term relationship. And often the greatest value a mentor may have is years down the road in your career, helping you look at a contract or an offer letter, those types of things. But I agree, there are a variety of individuals who can serve effectively as mentors. Sometimes they are at your same level, your peer. They just have experienced academics and have sort of learned the ropes a little bit ahead of you, and that can be quite useful. But there's often those sage faculty who can, with a little bit of prompting, can really be very helpful and help guide you as well.
Thank you. We have a couple of questions on mentoring from our participants. The first one brings up the question related to the challenge in finding mentors because they have their own responsibilities and commitments. So the question asks, what can a DIA do? But I would also ask, what can institutions do to promote a culture of mentoring where senior faculty are more engaged in mentoring junior faculty?
This is Eric. I think that's a real challenge in all institutions, finding faculty who can provide adequate time. So some institutions are turning towards the development of mentoring teams. And new faculty, faculty who have just relocated, or individuals who are on the job for the first time will benefit by having a team. And those individuals can be selected from the campus or from the school, who in essence are forming that initial network for that individual. And I think that that's certainly a very successful approach when it may be difficult to find that one mentor in an institution to be the lifelong guider.
And does it, to that challenge, does it matter if the mentor is at your institution, or can you find a successful mentoring relationship with someone at another institution?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, a mentor could be a phone call away, could be on a Skype or any other modes of communication by sending them. Yes, they could be, as long as they're willing to provide guidance and provide mentorship and provide the expertise and the feedback. Distance is not a problem for a mentor. I do have few mentors that they are not in my city.
I entirely agree. In today's world, mentoring can be across the world. The advantage of having one in your own institution is the closeness and proximity, and will know your institution well. But the the advantage of having one globally is can bring another perspective to you.
Thank you. Before we move on to our next topic, let me just welcome everyone who has joined us. Today's webinar is being presented by the IDEA Policy Center, which supports IDEA's role as the voice of dental education. I'm Eugene Anderson, IDEA Chief Policy Officer and Managing Vice President. Today's webinar topic is Navigating the Research Landscape, Key Strategies for Success. We have with us three experts who are sharing their perspectives and expertise regarding navigating the research landscape. Dr. Eric T. Everett, Dr. Anna Karina Mascarenas, and Dr. Charles Sayre. The next strategy we want to talk about is time management and discipline. So we want to turn to our next expert to discuss this important topic, and that's Dr. Mascarenas. How important is time management and discipline?
Thank you, Eugene. Having discipline and managing time with all the competing priorities a faculty has today and the many roles a faculty plays today is really very crucial. Research is never 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. job. Experiments don't wait till Monday morning when you can get back to your lab. They might need your attention on Friday night or Saturday morning. The important thing is to learn how to balance the competing interests. When you initially negotiate your first job, particularly if you're going to be a researcher, negotiate really hard for that dedicated research time. And then I generally say protect it really fiercely. If you're not productive at research by publishing and getting funding, when there is such an acute shortage of faculty today, that's the first thing that administrators would attempt to take away from you. And no productivity makes it really easy and gives them some justification for doing that. When there's so many additional responsibilities that might be given to you, researchers, we like to take on additional roles. We like to be involved in many projects. But all of this does cut into your dedicated research time. So sometimes you just have to learn to say no. The other is one important is about strategies to make writing, to write. You do have to take time to make writing a priority. Several strategies that you can use. Set dedicated time aside for writing each week, either for your next project or for a publication. If you don't need that writing time that has been set aside that week, then you can catch up on other things that you need to finish. The other that works is find an environment conducive to writing with no distractions. Let's say find your groove for writing here. If you're more productive at work, then sometimes it's just useful to close the door so that you're not disturbed. Myself, I'm more productive at home when I'm writing. To get me motivated to write, I actually listen to this Canadian rock singer, Bryan Adams, to get me focused. Little secret, almost every paper I've ever written, he was playing in the background for me. That roadmap that we talked about earlier, publications is one of your goals, should be on that roadmap. Put it on the notice board in your office so it's always in front of you. Another is find a motivator. Set a pact with a fellow junior colleague or mid-career colleague or in a similar situation or a friend from grad school so that you motivate each other. The end result of research is to add to knowledge. If the data from the most perfect study is sitting in your office, it's just data. The truth is, if research does not get published, it almost never happens.
Thank you, Anna. We certainly always appreciate a Bryan Adams reference. Any of our other experts like to talk about how they handle time management?
Yes, time management is actually critical, especially if you wear multiple hats. Let's say you're in the clinic, you also do research, and you do service to the institution. is really being disciplined and trying to kind of carve out time for each, and don't let one, if you can, don't let one drag into the other. So when you're in the clinic, you're in the clinic, and when you're doing research, I know it's easier said than done, but as Dr. Mascarena mentioned, it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's usually the research ends up being done a lot of time in the evenings and on the weekends, and a lot of the writing done off, when you leave the clinic. And so, but I mean, managing time is really critical, and that's the challenge we all face is coming up with more hours.
Finding time is seriously a challenge, and I think many of us will probably find this story a bit true. You're working on the weekend, and you're checking your email, and someone sends you an email at 1 a.m., and you're there to answer it. And that tells us that, we're all looking for that time where we can be productive, and we manage to find it. I think in your work week, if you can set aside time for certain activities, then be firm about it. Don't give in. The first time you make an exception to meet with someone during your research time or during your writing time, then your chances of losing that time again and again will occur. So be determined and a little bit selfish at times as well.
Thank you. We have a question on time management from one of our participants. As part of the roadmap, do you set a time limit with your goals?
Yes. So when I was junior faculty, I had this roadmap and mine was achieving tenure. The first milestone, of course, was my first review at midway through year 3. And so I had timelines for how many papers I would eventually need, and then backtracked how many projects I would need and by when they needed to get started and when the papers needed to go out to make the timeline. So definitely had a roadmap with time limits on them.
Thank you. All this discussion about time management and the importance of discipline for writing is a perfect segue to our final topic, publishing. It's often believed that research never published never existed. So for our last speaker on this important topic, we turn to Dr. Everett. What should a new researcher know about publishing as she is conducting her first project?
As scientists and researchers, as academics, we communicate a lot. And publishing is probably the pinnacle of our communication efforts. It's probably the most fundamental way that we share our discoveries and our data. Unfortunately, publishing is also a metric that's used by faculty and departments, as well as schools and institutions, for judging scholarship. So this creates often some difficulties to sort of keep things going. But as said earlier, you have to make it a priority. So you have to write, and you make this publishing a priority. And there's this maxim to remember: publish or perish. It's not life or death, but it certainly can make your academic career a bit uncomfortable. I would also say, do not sit on your work. Keep making this a priority. And remember that you're telling a story with your publications. And each of us do a wide variety of research. Sometimes it's mechanistic, sometimes it's descriptive. As young researchers, we often reproducing some of the work of others, and we call that Me Too science. But as we develop, our work becomes more and more original. It's also important to seek out internal review, especially if you're a new or junior faculty when you're crafting your manuscript. Select your journals carefully, and go for the one with the higher impact first. There's no loss in looking at that. Become strategic with your research in terms of some studies are a little bit more difficult to publish, like pilot studies. Occasionally, confirmation of other work can be a bit challenging. Negative studies still are very difficult to publish, even though they may be more important occasionally than other research studies. Also, sometimes issues with reproducibility are a bit challenging. But remember, publications are assets when seeking funding, and they also become your career capital. So publications certainly should drive the field forward. They provide evidence of proof of principle and feasibility of what you propose to do. They're the product of peer review, which means that others have found this to be quality work, and so it's the statement of your research. They also demonstrate your emerging or established expertise in a field. And finally, as we often know in academics, they're a direct measurement of your productivity. So always, avoid salami science and the least publishable unit. As a journal editor, we often see a lot of very concise studies that are just part of a larger story that, in a better context, all of that should be together and not just a thin slice. Thank you, Eugene.
Thank you, Eric. Related to publishing, one of the things that I wonder about is what role should conference presentations play in the publishing process and building a CV? Certainly, there are venues such as the conferences that ADIA offers, also the American Association for Dental Research, as well as the American Educational Research Association. So what role should conference presentations play?
I mean, conferences are great to network and disseminate the work and discuss your work with your colleagues and get ideas and get more ideas and keep evolving with the project. And hopefully that presentation that you do at any of these scientific meetings will translate, or maybe it already translated, into a publication. So this way, a meeting presentation and a submission for a paper should most likely go hand in hand. So this way you can discuss and basically get more ideas and get feedback from your colleagues in the field.
A good strategy is also to use that conference presentation as a motivator to write that paper. Because all of us, when we come back from meetings, are pretty excited by the feedback we got and the science. And so that's a really good time to put that paper down in writing. You already have the abstract, so part of your work is already done. You had a discussion. That can come into the discussion pieces. You already have your results that you presented. So that's a really good time to come back and write.
And I think sometimes we need a reason to be able to go to a meeting or a conference, and an abstract is a perfect vehicle to make that possible. I would urge everyone to take a close look at your CVs and compare the number of abstracts you have, either those that were peer-reviewed or published or just sort of guest abstracts for other meetings, and compare that number to your actual publications. You really don't want to see a large number of abstracts and a small number of publications. I don't know what the ideal ratio might be, but certainly if you could keep things close to 1-to-1, then you're converting your abstracts to papers more effectively.
Thank you all. One final question from me, and then we'll see what additional questions we have from our listeners, is if you knew what you know now, what would you do differently as it relates to navigating the research landscape? Who'd like to go first?
I think, hindsight, they say, is 20/20. And thinking back, maybe listening better to individuals who are trying to help me and mentor me. And that can go really far back in my life. But I think that's part of it is remembering, is to listen and to remember.
Yeah, if I can also add is, obviously to embark on a research career or academic or academia, you do need that fire in you. You do need that passion to pursue that path, but also the institution and the infrastructure should be also there to support it. So I would definitely carefully assess the available resources and the institution carefully before committing down this path and making sure that research is a priority at these institutions. So this way your goals and your aspiration could be met with a support system that actually could push everything forward.
From my perspective is the momentum that you might lose when you move, and particularly studies you were involved with that you should have stayed on top of so that you took them to fruition as well as to publications. Exciting day for me yesterday was a project that I had worked on 4 or 5 years ago finally got into a paper. And so I thought I had lost momentum on it, but it's now in paper. It's almost accepted for publication. So that was exciting to get that out yesterday.
Thank you. We now have about 5 to 7 minutes for additional questions and discussion. So if any of our listeners would like to post questions, please post those now. I will begin with a topic that we touched on a little bit earlier, but I'll come to Charles for this. I know you've done extensive work to engage non-research faculty in the work of the research faculty to build a bridge between the two. Can you say a little bit about the importance of this effort?
Yes, actually, the researchers need the clinical faculty. Usually, clinical faculty think that the researchers are doing their own thing, and then actually, researchers absolutely need that feedback, that clinical feedback. This is very critical to the progression of the project, and so usually I start with trying to gauge the clinical faculty interest. What are they interested in? What is the topic that actually gets them excited? Because once they get excited and the passion is there, then really making that connection to the basic scientist or the projects that they're available become much easier, and so really it's sort of like a matchmaking or getting them together. Or actually, it could be my own research. The clinician could be basically a topic that I didn't think of, and getting to know their interest and also my interest. So really, it's a lot of listening, a lot of really working with the clinical faculty and trying to see their interest, and if they're willing to commit some time too. It becomes a team, so there is a time commitment from the scientists, but also from the clinicians, and so it's sort of embarking on a project together. And usually, when there is when there is a match, it usually works out pretty well.
All right, great. Next question. This is from one of our participants. When does data become too old to publish? How can you gauge this?
In my go ahead.
I'm sorry. I was going to say that if someone publishes it first, then yours is too old.
I was going to say the same thing. It's kind of what the state of the science is at that time. If somebody's already reported it, then yes, it's become old.
Right. Because you can go to a meeting and you can present something new. And there are a lot of people there, and they're interested in what you have to say. There's nothing to prevent them to go back to their labs and to do some work. I think that they expect you to publish it promptly, and they're following with their own work and results. And if you're slow, their work becomes the first reported work.
Thank you. Thank you, Eric. Next question. How important do you believe that case report publications are relevant to your advancement in research?
Case reports are sort of an odd beast. Often they're important because if you have limited numbers of patients and also a very good review of the literature, they can be quite valuable. But they themselves do not represent much research per se. They're very descriptive. And occasionally it's an opportunity for a student or someone that the faculty is mentoring, and let the student work on developing the case report and do some of the heavy lifting. And that's a teaching moment for the student, and it also allows the faculty to maybe focus on other things. So in addition to case reports, sometimes book chapters can be a kiss of death too. So everyone should sort of consider those offers seriously as well.
Can you explain more, Eric, about book chapters and what you mean, kiss of death?
Well, every now and then we're offered an opportunity to make a contribution to a text, and we often do not think very clearly of how much work this is going to be in order to be a very important piece of communication. So book chapters can take a huge amount of time doing the research and following up. And so that's my point, is that they can eat into your time, and if we're all on the same page, our time is quite precious and valuable.
All right, thank you. Thank you. A couple of final questions. How do you approach the research landscape after tenure? If one of our experts could just give their perspective on this question.
You keep going. And I mean, it is, if you have a research program and you're tenured and you really want to maintain that energy and that, so the same as, we hope that the same energy you put in before tenure will continue after tenure.
Got it. Thank you. And final question, what is the best way to connect to industry when you're looking to partner for a research project?
There's often faculty in your own institution who have very nice professional relationships with industry. And sometimes they can make introductions for you. Additionally, in the clinic, there are a lot of devices and tools being used. And so sometimes it's just reaching out to the company and developing a dialogue. Eventually, it becomes their idea, and you sort of facilitate that through a contract. But that's essentially how it starts as well. And it doesn't hurt when you go to meetings to go to the vendors and start to talk to them seriously about what they have and maybe some questions that you have as well.
All right, thank you, Eric. And with that, our time is up. I want to thank each of our three experts for your time and knowledge today. And I want to thank all of our participants across the U.S., Canada, and around the globe for participating with us. We look forward to seeing you next month on our next webinar. We will be sending out information to everyone very soon about the next part of the ADIA Leading Conversations webinar series. Kurt, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Eugene. That does conclude today's presentation, Navigating the Research Landscape, Key Strategies for Success, brought to you by ADIA and presented by Eric Everett, Anna Karina Mascarenas, and Charles Fair. Your ADIA host was Dr. Eugene Anderson. We do hope everyone enjoyed the presentation. As a reminder, we ask you to take a moment and complete the evaluation that will appear momentarily on your screen. Your comments and suggestions are always important as it helps us provide you with future quality programming. Please reference your materials for instructions on obtaining CE for this presentation. Your handouts include the steps necessary to receive continuing education. And we also remind you to be sure and follow @AdiaWeb on Twitter to join the conversation using the hashtag ResearchLandscape. Again, that's the hashtag ResearchLandscape. You can find the recording and presentation of the program at www.adia.org/researchlandscape. That will be posted 1 week from today. Today's program is copyright in 2014 by the American Dental Education Association, all rights reserved.